Welcome back to Bass Capital Radio Podcast. I'm your host, Lara Wallace, and today I'm here with Cherie Register. Thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate your friends who love history have sent unto you or unto me you for all things Crescent City, and I'm very excited to have the opportunity to talk with you.
Well, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I always start the podcast. If you're watching, you know what I'm going to ask. How did you end up in Putnam County?
I was born and raised here in Putnam County. My mother was born and raised here. My grandmother was born and raised here.
Wow.
I go back 6 generations here in Putnam County.
That's incredible.
In the Crescent City area.
And solely in the Crescent City area?
Yes.
That's incredible.
Yes.
So you have a great deal of firsthand knowledge in your veins. Like it's just part of you.
Yeah.
And do you have children who also reside
I've got a son who actually lives in Palaca, but he is building a house now in Crescent City to be closer to me.
Aw.
So that would make the 7th generation, along with his daughter, the 8th generation, will be all down on the home place.
How amazing.
Like that. And then I've got 2 stepchildren that live in St. Augustine.
And we'll bring them back. You guys got to come back. Just got to stay in Crescent City. I love that. So eight generations now,
Right.
But 6 generations ago. Do you know where your family came from to get to Crescent City?
They actually, the 7th generation moved from South Carolina into the Middleburg area.
Okay.
Right around the 1820s.
Wow.
And then my people came in I think it was right around 1840 is when my people came to Volusia County. I mean, to the Putnam County area, the Crescent City area.
Crescent City. Do you know what brought them?
I do not really know what they came for, but
a lot of
they settled in the same area that I actually live in now.
Oh wow!
So
you know those parts in and out.
Oh yeah,
all the secret hidey holes over there. Are you near any bodies of water?
We're on the south end of Lake Crescent.
Lovely. Yeah. So everybody
down Hall Creek area.
Fishing holes. So that's all I can think about is somebody's got generations of a good fishing hole out there.
Yeah.
Amazing. Now, growing up, did you attended school in Crescent City?
I attended school in Crescent City, yes.
And what did you go to school for after you graduated? Did you?
I actually did not go to college. I was ready to settle down, so I got married after high school and had my son.
I share that. I did go to at the time it was a community college, St. John's River State.
Yeah.
I thought after some time in the veterinary field, I wanted to do that. But after enough time, I was like, that would get boring just doing cats, dogs over and over. And took a break and majored in motherhood and loved it.
Yeah.
So I think that's incredible that you get to be with your children at that level.
Yeah.
So how did history become a part of your life?
I was raised with history. My mother, Marjorie Neal Nelson, was involved in history ever since she had gone to college and gotten involved in some. My grandmother would send her the weekly newspapers and had Miss Bessie Williams' story in it.
Okay.
And Mama would cut those out. And I've still got her college scrapbook from where she cut out those articles every week.
Oh,
and that's really got her started in the history.
So really it's in the blood.
Very much in the blood. And I was the only daughter, had 3 brothers. Mm-hmm. And every vacation we ever went on, it was always at a cemetery somewhere.
Oh, wow.
So, we were just brought up in history, and I've just always loved it.
It's funny you mentioned cemeteries. One of the coolest findings I have stumbled upon, I like posting photos of old photos and having our viewers and our Facebook followers guess where was this. And so I started off, really, I guess it's easier to start where you're located. So Palaca, I've got a good amount of that, but really wanted to branch out because Putnam County is way bigger than people realize. And Crescent City has just as rich of history as Putnam County does. And so that's why I was very excited to be connected with you. But in looking for these old photos, I came across Burt's, B-U-R-T-Z, directory from it's 1912 to 1913. And it's a Palaca directory where the main street here was called Lemon Street. And it had the old photos and like there wasn't zip codes at the time, that like there was a 809 and a half as the address. So I was really intrigued by that. But I found that on a cemetery site. And I thought, how neat that somebody's connected that. So What kind of history do you find? I mean, obviously you've got the grave sites, but what was the angle that you would go to these cemeteries for?
Just hunting family.
Oh, how
Hunting
cool.
family, because I remember when I'm a member of the Daughters of the American Revolution, and we would go to South Carolina, which is where my patriot's from, and Mama would go through the cemeteries hunting for all these patriots, and every summer I go up to the Jones reunion, which started in '64, and Mama was one of the first secretaries, and now I'm secretary, so it hasn't left the family long.
I love it.
We'd go to that Patriot Cemetery, I mean, that where his tombstone is, and we just, just hunt the history, trace our lineage through
Yeah.
the cemeteries.
Um, Tell me about the Daughters of the American Revolution. Tell me about that.
Well, you have to prove that you have a patriot that either fought or did civil service
Okay.
during the American Revolution time.
And
And
they take that very
very
seriously.
seriously, like I said, you have to document that all the way back. I am the registrar for the local William Bartram chapter of DAR.
Very
So
cool.
I've been registrar going on 4 years now, and I know I've probably gotten in close to 20 members
Wow.
documenting which is very rewarding, because most of these people, these ladies, they don't know their history.
Okay. Yeah.
They do not know their history.
So tell me a little bit about that process, because I've had the pleasure of interviewing with Sam
Hmm.
Carr, and the Sons of the American Revolution came
Right.
up. Ken and Janice have been on
Yeah.
our a guest on our podcast, and I think my understanding was there are five sons in Putnam County,
Right.
and
There are not very many. John Robinson's trying to build that back up.
and
But
probably are more, but they, like you said, they don't know their history.
right.
So what is, like, let's say I'm interested in being part of that. What is your role? What do you do as a
My role
registrar?
is you would have to furnish me the first three generations.
Okay.
Yourself, your parents, and your grandparents.
Okay.
And then after that, I take it over, and through Ancestry, I build your tree. And then I start documenting those trees, hunting for a patriot. And successfully, knock on wood, I've only had one person that I was not able to prove.
Wow.
And it was a matter of, she came from the hills of Tennessee, and there was a lot of intermarriages and stuff like that back in those days, and it just didn't go nowhere.
Right.
So, but
A
I've been
small
able
trunk
to,
on that
yeah,
tree.
I've been able to document most of them. Some I run into problems with, but I've got some more people that have a lot more experience than I have that are
Mhm.
able to help me out, which is kind of ironic, because one of them was a lady in Gainesville, and she called me not too long ago, and she was looking at one of my patriots that I'm trying to get a supplemental on, because I joined under the one, but I've proven 7 other ones. She and I are related. We're 7th cousins.
Wow, that's
And
incredible.
never would have dreamed it. Never would
Uh,
have dreamed it.
it's always interesting, those small coincidences. I just heard about two locals here, one born and raised here, one not, and they were talking about, again, history kind of came up, and he photographed this gentleman's senior photo in another state. So it's always wild how
Yeah.
these little connections happen. How long does the process usually take when you have the first three generations for you to trace it back that far?
Depends on how lucky we get.
Okay.
Some of that stuff is pretty, like if you're from the northern areas, northern states, your records are there.
Hmm.
If you're from South Carolina, Georgia, Sherman did a tremendous discredit to all of us when he burned all the courthouses
Mm.
during the Civil War time.
I
So a
would have
lot of
never.
that is not available. The records are just not there. You can't get
Wow.
them.
That's
But so you have to go, different ways through land records, and sometimes you have to just wills and things like that. But sometimes I'm lucky, I can get one and get it done within a couple hours, because it's just right
wow.
there.
Yeah, yeah.
But other times I spend months on them.
I think that there's I've said this many times, there's pros and cons to technology, but
Hmm.
now that those records can be scanned in versus hand
Yes.
typed, you have a lot more chances
Yeah,
of
Ancestry is
success.
amazing with it. I have one lady that I was trying to get in. Well, I got her in, but I was over at her house one day. She lives in Crescent City, and she had pulled out her family Bible, and it's like, well, where is this person at on your Bible? She said nobody knew anything about him.
Hmm.
So I went to look. I said, well, I'll go home and I'll look and see what I can find. And I went back and I looked, and he was a Northern Union officer during the Civil War
Hmm.
was put in Andersonville State Prison, or Andersonville Prison, during the Civil War. The prison was built for 10,000 people. He was in that prison during the time they had 33,000 people, prisoners,
Ooh.
in an area like 28 acres. So can you imagine, in Georgia in the summertime?
Oh,
So
man.
when he got out, of course he had mental issues. But I was able to get records from his medical records. I found a picture of him, and all kinds of different references I was able to find for her. And I went back to her house and said, let me introduce you to your great-grandfather.
How
And that's what's so
amazing.
rewarding
I
about it.
bet. I bet. As I continue to uncover historical, I don't even want to call them stories, but accounts, because some of it is family stories, but really is a record of things that have been passed down orally or,
Yeah.
or through articles such as what you found or documents. But I find that it creates a different relationship with your past when you
Mhm.
can see somebody and be like, oh, that
Yeah,
nose
that's
looks like
it.
my son's nose,
Yeah.
or oh, he's into this, I'm also into this, and it really makes you realize there's a nature and then a nurture part of things, and
Right.
there are a lot of things that are nature that we don't recognize.
That's true.
So
Yeah, it's just a
preserve.
very rewarding experience for me to be able to trace these people's families for them.
I bet. And you were very blessed to have that already instilled in your
Right.
family, where I will tell you now, and it wasn't until I got excited about history through this podcast. I've always been excited about the
Hmm.
community and recognizing that we have rich history. I hear little fun facts here or there, and when you fact check them
Yeah.
and find out they're accurate, it's really unique to know a part of the past. But I never thought to ask my mom and dad about their history. And now, I'm going to be working with my mom to uncover that, because both
Mhm.
my parents have roots in Putnam County.
Yeah.
And so I could see how that would be
Yeah.
very rewarding. And we have resources here in town that will help you do that. Miss Mary Lynn, or Mary Reese, who
Hmm.
has recorded with me, has a historical uh, function in a building that she'll help you do the same
Right.
thing you're
Right.
doing. What a gift to give
Yeah.
somebody,
Well,
truly.
even with Mary, I mean, I work closely with her because through the family search and the ancestry on you got online, there's some things that you're only allowed to get from the research center. So it's nothing for me to take a picture of something and send it to her and says, well, you dig this up for me.
Right.
So we work closely together with some of
You're
that stuff.
you're sleuths,
Yeah.
history sleuths. I like it.
Yeah.
Um, with that information, I think that people get to know themselves better, and I hope that we can inspire future generations. A lot of things, and we were talking a little bit about this before we started recording, have become digital.
Hmm.
And everything's paperless. We want to go to a paperless environment, which is great. Don't feel like there's anything wrong with saving the environment, but destroying those things before they've been recorded, it
Right.
is so heartbreaking to hear of parts of our history where this is a place where 4 generations ago, maybe this table, somebody sat around and had a life-changing conversation or a
Hmm.
community changing. I just think as you're watching these, please remember that those things that you find in grandma's box of where she's talking to somebody, exchange in letters or photographs, at least digitize them and,
Right.
and capture
Okay.
that, because they could be a key component to some work that you're doing, and sharing that with your family. So,
Yeah.
we keep the lineage and the history
And
alive.
I think that's why my mother built such a huge collection of historical stuff, is those families would come into town when their parents would die. They were not interested in it, but
Mhm.
they knew mom was, and they would call mom, and mom didn't turn away nothing.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk
So,
about
I mean, she kept it all.
you. So you have curated quite a
I have
collection.
got quite a
So
collection
tell
of
me a little
history.
bit about what you have in your collection.
I've got mom had, like I said, she was born and raised in Crescent City, and she made connections to a lot of the older people before they would pass away, and they would share that information with it, the old pictures, the old photographs, the old, postcards, the papers. I
Mhm.
mean, tons and tons of papers, abstracts, property deeds,
Right.
all those things that she would take, and they're all still in a box. I don't know what I'm going to do with it all. We're,
Well, you had a place that you were
we
able to
were,
display it,
right,
correct?
we had the Fruitland Peninsula Historical Society was started in 2010, and it was just a small group of people that were interested in Crescent City history.
Mhm.
And we stayed small until we were able to start expanding, and we got a lease for the Miller Middle School in 2012. I think we went. No, this is 2024. 2022.
Okay.
2022. We got a lease to go into the Miller Middle School, and we took over the media center and made a humongous archives out of it, and
Oh,
it was really a nice archives. And we were
right.
able to display all of Mom's pictures, uh, put all her books out that she had, which is quite a collection of books. I mean, hundreds of copies of books,
And we're talking books
uh,
that are related to history or
all
written
related to
by?
history.
Okay.
All related to history. None of your regular reading books, but all related to Florida history
I will
and
love to see that
areas,
collection.
all the history that's around this area. Not and just
Wow.
Florida. Well, Florida history, a lot of Putnam County, but you had Jacksonville and
Yeah,
Volusia
we're
County, and
very connected.
we were all connected. Volusia County, well, Pearson, Barberville, all those intermingled together.
Sure.
Um, so we had all those books. All those were out on display. But then we were asked to leave in March of 2023 when the school decided they were going to uh, tear the building down to build a new Miller School, elementary school.
Right.
But then all that's changed now, so we're kind of in limbo.
Limbo.
Very much in limbo. What
So
we
all
need to
of this
get.
stuff
And
now
in the meantime, our membership has grown almost to 160 people now.
wow.
So we have got a lot of interest in the
I was going to
history.
say, you
Yeah,
clearly have interest. The
yeah,
need for
yeah.
what you have is
Yes,
there.
yeah.
And my understanding is all this is now stored.
Stored back in my house.
So
Yeah,
your house is truly,
yeah. It's truly a museum.
yes.
Matter of fact, my son has told me that if I should die tomorrow, the house just stays, and it stays as a museum, as a storage shed.
Well, if you are
Yeah.
watching this and you're in Crescent City or anywhere that might have the ability to help bring this collection back out to the public for many reasons, not only personal interest, but to be able to display history.
Right.
Please be sure to comment below, send an email. All the contact information is there.
Yeah.
We'll be sure to connect because you've got some groups that you're members with, not just the Daughters of the American Revolution, but is there a historical group that you were talking about?
Yeah,
Explain that.
Fruitland Peninsula Historical Society.
We'll be sure to leave a
Yeah,
link to that.
yeah.
So maybe you can help bring this back to life because I think I mean, if you got that kind of interest,
Oh yeah, we've got the interest.
then we definitely want to honor
And a lot
that.
of people think of Fruitland, because I've ran across this a lot. You think of Fruitland, you think of this little town, Fruitland.
Right. And that's
But
what I
the
thought of.
Fruitland Peninsula is anything south of Dunn's Creek down to Seville
I
on
learned
both
something new
sides.
today,
That is
class.
that is your peninsula.
Okay.
And there was one little historical fact you might be interested in that, and I couldn't find the date, but I think it was in the early 30s, that south of we talked about this earlier, that when you grew up in South Putnam, you kind of felt like you were on your own.
Right.
You didn't go to Palaca for anything. And they actually had a meeting, I think it was in the early 30s, where they were discussing pulling away from Putnam County and forming Fruitland County. So I was trying
Oh.
to find that date last night, and I couldn't find it.
If you find it,
But
you
yeah,
let me know. We'll add
yeah,
some
well, they wanted to
subtext to
form their
this.
own county, but the vote didn't pass.
Well, I mean, it's funny, and I think I've mentioned this, in other interviews that growing up, we lived in San Mateo, Satsuma, really close to Dunn's Creek. And that especially felt like limbo because we were close enough that if we just went over the bridge, we would have been at a different school.
Right.
We were just on the precipice of being at Palaca High School. And it was a a trip to town. And I remember hearing that, like, we're going to take a trip to town because anything, once you have to go over the bridge, you're on an excursion. It's
That's true. That's
20,
true.
25 minutes
Yep.
to get to a local store, a
Uh-huh.
goods store, department store rather. Um, and then when I remember growing up and, being out in Crescent City, Pomona Park, Willaca area, and all of that stuff that way, uh, you know, the Winn Dixie was fairly new,
Hmm.
comparatively. But you just kind of stayed and played in that area and
Yeah.
didn't want to drive all the way to town.
No,
So
you did. Well, when I was growing up, you had enough in Crescent City. You didn't have to go anywhere. There was,
right,
stores all over the place.
right.
To me, Crescent City has gone backwards, big time backwards compared to what it was when I was growing up.
Well, tell me a little bit about your memories growing up there.
Well, there are stores all over the place. Right now, you have a big empty lot they call the Miller Square because the Miller Enterprises was the last thing on there. But they had Ben Franklin's.
Mm-hmm.
It had grocery stores, Ben Franklin's. There was all kind of little shops up and down Central Avenue. It was booming. You didn't have to go anywhere. You bought all your clothes there. Two dress shops. It was all over the place.
Right. What
But
are your
it's just gone backwards. I mean, there's nothing there now.
Well, I hope, I know there have been efforts to
Yeah,
revitalize.
they are working on revitalizing
Right.
it,
And
but
much
it'll
like
never be
Palaca.
what it was.
No, no. And,
No.
that's interesting that you mentioned that, as we're also trying to revitalize in Palaca.
Hmm.
Um, I, I was sharing with a number of guests who are born and raised in Putnam County their memories of just being on, it was Lemon Street at one point, Main Street,
Hmm.
not needing to leave, but spending all their time where they had the Howl movie theater here and,
Right.
different department stores, and they got everything that they needed and just spent time in the shops downtown
Hmm.
where, and then the mall came. And it was, if you want to survive, you go to the mall. Well, now the mall's closed
Yes. Yeah.
and it'll never be the same. You're
That's
right.
right.
But we can definitely bring back a piece of that
Yeah.
and honor, what was. Um, yeah, I think about, while it may not look the same, a lot of people who come to Putnam County from out of town, they love this little shop feel to Putnam
Right.
County, the
Yeah.
small town
Small
feel.
town. Yeah.
Exactly. So hopefully we continue to preserve history and honor that, but fill those vacant places, and shop local. I love the fact that if I'm buying something from a local store, that I know I'm putting food on my friend's table.
That's true. That is
and
very
and
true.
that's very
Yeah.
fulfilling. And not that I'm not appreciative of every once in a while needing a part and being able to run into Lowe's or Home Depot if needed, but I will go to Ace Hardware before I will go anywhere else
Right.
because
Yeah.
it's local, and I know that they give back to the community that they serve.
Yeah. Growing up in Crescent City was fabulous as a kid. I mean, you didn't have to worry about anything. I know when we would leave in the morning, you had a few rules you had to go by because mom, dad never knew where we were.
Hmm.
We would take off on our bikes, and if they
Right.
really wanted to find us, they'd drive around the neighborhood to hunt for the dog because we always had a dog with us.
I love it.
You know, but the Baptist chimes went off at 12 o'clock. You
Okay.
had 30 minutes. You had to get home to eat for lunch, or
Uh-huh.
you were in trouble. Presbyterian chimes went off at 6 o'clock. You had 30 minutes. You had to be home. Other than that, they had no idea where we were.
Right.
And we were only allowed, if we wanted to go swimming, we had to let her know we were going swimming
Safety.
for
Absolutely.
safety.
Yeah.
But other than that, she had, because we all, went to swimming lessons every summer. We all knew how to swim. That
Right.
wasn't a thing of the,
With all the lakes out there, it's
yeah.
nuts.
I mean, Crescent City is only, 6 blocks wide between the two waters.
Yeah. Yeah. True.
So, I mean, you learn to swim early.
Yeah, and that's just part of life
Yeah.
growing up. I can understand that. I mean, I've swam many a times
Yeah.
out there, and you know, I think that at that time the world has changed so much.
Mhm.
And think to quote many guests, things were just different. And everybody watched out for everybody's kids. And it's a much more dangerous world. But I do believe, like we live in East Palaca, and in the community we live in, I still have reservations about letting the kids go too far, even being in their teens. But I know if they're on the street, they're safe It's a communal
Right.
raising.
Right.
And I love that because as a child in Satsuma, San Mateo area, I would get on my bike and go. And when the street light came on, that's when I needed to be home. So,
That's it.
so you guys went, if you weren't swimming, what were you doing growing
Playing.
up?
I was a tomboy. Like I said, I grew up with three brothers,
Hmm.
and there was only one other girl in the neighborhood. So we were tomboys. We would be out in orange groves all over the place.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
was our big thing, was playing in the orange groves. You know how they used to have the fruit crates on the side of the road when they were picking oranges.
Yeah.
Those made perfect forts.
I love
You know,
that.
just loved to play in those, and the police would stop and try to get us out, but they never could get into those forts because there were little tunnels all the way through. But that's how we spent our summer, playing in the forest,
Ah,
playing in the woods. Or I was a bookworm. I'd grab a book and go climb an oak tree and sit in the oak tree and just read books for hours and
oh, that's
hours.
incredible.
But it was a perfect place for growing up.
And entertainment wise, what did you guys
There
do?
was no entertainment,
No
Chris. So
entertainment.
you made your own entertainment.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah. I can
yeah.
relate to that. Again, I spent a lot of time in the woods. I always had this dream as a child because, again, going into town, that's where the roller skating rink
Hmm.
was, and bowling alley, and the movie theater. And Mom and Dad worked, so we spent a lot of time tooling around the woods. And I always wanted to build like a mini house, a
Yeah.
fort times 10. And that was always
Yeah,
what we
forts.
did.
We always built
Oh,
forts all
yeah.
over the place. Yeah,
It's there's just something so magical
yeah.
about that. And I think what one of the things that is so amazing about especially Crescent City is how much land is still available. Like
Hmm.
you cannot find that in Jacksonville,
No,
or
no,
especially now St. Augustine is booming. And I love that they've grown so much and there's a lot to do there, and there's never a time where you can't find something, but you also are not going to find that
no,
as much near as much woods and
no,
nature
no,
to
you're
enjoy.
not. Matter of fact, my grandson in St. Augustine has just purchased property in Satsuma because he just can't find what he wants in St. Augustine. He's born and raised in St. Augustine, but he's
That
coming to
is,
Satsuma to live because that's what he wants to, the area he wants to. He wants the woods.
I just posted today a interview with a realtor out of St. Augustine, and
Hmm.
actually found him by uh, being online and looked up Palaca, Florida. Was doing more research again, and he gave a wonderful account of what the life St. Augustine versus Palaca. Which one's for
Yeah.
you, and said phenomenal things about Palaca, which is always important. That
Hmm.
I know Putnam County is an incredible place, and he mentioned that if you want land, if you want space, you know, Putnam County is where it's at, and that's true. You're not going to find that what we have anywhere else. And in addition to that, with such rich history.
Well, that's true. My granddad came down here in, Mom was born in 28, so he came down here in 25, I think, 1925, and he was a migrant worker from South Carolina, coming down here picking oranges, and he met my grandmother down here. And then they ended up getting married, and he was able to buy almost 500 acres down there on the south end of Lake Crescent for 35 cents an acre back then.
Wow.
And
Wow.
we have managed to keep close to 300 of those acres in the family.
That's
Yeah,
incredible. Oh my
yeah,
gosh. I told the kids, as my children are starting to get to that age where they're growing up and getting older, and my eldest is moving out in less than a week. I want to buy a compound, but I could find that many
yeah,
acres close enough in Putnam County. I wouldn't have to leave here, which
yeah.
is
Right.
incredible. But that's a lot of acreage,
That's it. I
and
mean,
to stay
the
in the
family has
family.
grown, so it's, has spread out. And
Yeah,
I know my piece of property that I've inherited will continue because my son's going to build a house on it.
I love it.
So with that, but
We'll have to come out and see
yeah.
the Register compound. So
Well, it's
what?
a Nelson
Yeah, I
compound.
was going to
Jones,
ask
Jones,
what
yeah,
name. What
it was
name is
Jones.
that?
Well, my granddad was Jones, Sam
Okay,
Jones.
Sam Jones.
Yeah, and
That's
he's the one that
amazing.
bought all of it, and pretty much. But Clifton Road used to be nothing but, there was a farm, McBride's nursery up at the beginning of the road, and then my granddad owned almost all of it down
Wow, that's so
south of
cool.
that.
I'd love to.
But
I'd love to see that on an aerial map.
yeah, actually,
Uh,
I've got an aerial map that was in my mother's collection, but that's one of the very few things my son has told me that he does want.
Good for him. I'm
because
good.
it
Take an
has
interest in that.
all of the, it shows the orange groves that were platted and laid out and all that before any of that land had eventually been sold off.
Right.
You
I'd
know,
love
so
to
the
see that. You're gonna
housing
have
and
to
all
snap a
that.
picture and I'll include it in
Yeah,
this so we can talk about that.
yeah.
Um,
But it's just, it was a great place to grow up.
well,
Great place to raise kids.
oh yeah, that's, I would not raise my children anywhere
Yeah. And
else.
if you got in trouble, your mama knew. I remember one time I was kicking a beer can on the way to church. And my mother knew about it before I got home from church because somebody had seen me doing
Oh
it. You
yeah.
know?
You
So
don't you
they
don't get in
would,
trouble in a tight knit community.
no, they would call home and let you know. Great place to grow up, though.
Well, tell me, as you remember growing up, hearing about the history, what are some of the facts and interesting things that you've learned about Crescent City that you wouldn't have known had you not been exposed? Anything stand out in your mind or
God, there's so much of it. When you go back and you look at and you read Miss Bessie Williams' story,
real quick before you do that, tell me who Bessie Williams is.
Miss Bessie came to Crescent City in 1850, and that is also the year that the city incorporated.
Okay.
She came with her father, who formed the Episcopal Church down there,
Okay.
by steamboat into Crescent City, and they came into, it used to be you would take a boat, they came from New York, come all the way down the Atlantic coast into
Mm-hmm.
Jacksonville, Palaca, down Dunn's Creek into Crescent City,
Mm-hmm.
where they got off and they stayed at the Capitol House, which was the only wooden house in Crescent City at that time, a boarding house.
Okay.
And they camped there while they built their home. And that's the way, Crescent City originally started, was that.
People
When
would
they
come.
would come on the steamboat, get off there at the so-called City Dock, which is Central Avenue now,
Uh-huh.
and they would sleep in tents or whatever and build their little wooden shacks to build the town up.
How incredible.
But she tells of that entire history of the town being actually built and all that. And one interesting thing there's so many interesting things, but one that really sticks in my head, and I've got pictures of them, of the cows sleeping on the streets. Horses were forbidden to run loose in the streets,
For the cow.
but the cows were not, because Florida had free range laws.
Right.
So there's pictures of the cows sleeping on the streets, and you had to have so many people vote to get rid of the cows before they were banned from the streets. So we got records of, they finally put it up for a vote, and they said since the cows have names, they added their names to that vote.
Oh my goodness.
And finally the cows voted themselves off the street.
That is a great piece of history right
Yeah.
there. Oh my gosh.
But at least it got the cows off the street, and I think that was 1923.
Wow.
But it was just so many just different interesting things. The Women's Club was formed in 1890 down there from 15 women that formed it. And those women are really the ones that built Crescent City. When you go back and you look at their early history.
Girl power, right?
Girl power, Northern girl power at that. They're the ones that got the men into clearing the roads.
Right.
Getting establishing
Yeah.
the roads, getting all the sand spurs and all that stuff out. They were just constantly on the guys' necks trying to get it built. Women's Club, they got their first building made in 1890. Like I said, in 1890 they were established, second oldest women's club in Florida.
Wow.
Just
That's
little old Crescent,
historical,
little old
yeah.
Crescent City, second oldest in Florida. They built their own movie theater back in I think it was 1912. They started like a little theater,
Oh,
which is
cool.
now Producers Hardware's warehouse
Okay.
down there. They started the original Women's Club building burnt back in '69. It burnt. They started the first library. All the city functions were held at the Women's Club. They said they were spearheading
Yeah.
a lot of the growth of Crescent City back then.
That's incredible.
So when you sit there and you look at the history of all of them,
Yeah, honestly, I mean,
and Miss Bessie was one of the 15 women that started it.
wow. Really, if you think about it, I always like to envision the concepts or the accounts and stories that I hear. And you wouldn't think of, like, if I thought about Palaca and the Women's Club being the catalyst for all that is here, that thought really wouldn't cross my
Yeah.
mind. But
But it
these were
happened
very
in Crescent,
determined women.
very determined women in Crescent City. They even, and Miss Bessie talks about it in her history about how she would always ride the horses when they were always trying to preserve the trees
Okay.
because guys would just go in and cut all the trees down, but the
Mhm.
women wanted the trees saved.
Right.
So they would always ride their horses around, making sure that the guys didn't cut too much off the trees and
Right.
that kind of
Policing
stuff.
them.
Yeah.
That translates to,
Yeah.
I think about my dad maybe mowing for my mom and accidentally mowing over one of
Yeah.
the plants. Don't do
Yeah.
that. A little bit aggressive there.
Yeah. But
So
when you look at the history of Crescent City and the Crescent City Women's Club, they're
hand in hand.
intertwined,
Wow.
intertwined big time.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Are there
Intertwined.
any things that you've come across that were really revolutionary? I mean, that's pretty revolutionary if you ask
Hmm.
me. The women's club, the place that they hold in
Yeah.
history, and I feel like maybe somewhere along the way I heard about a feud that happened. Maybe
The
it wasn't
Braddock Turner feud. Yeah.
that.
Janice was
Yeah,
talking
Janice
about
was
that.
talking about
Yeah.
that. Yeah, that was really
Yeah.
interesting. That things came out of that.
Yeah.
Anything like that would be remarkable. That if you got some, I'm
Uh,
here to listen to
yeah.
whatever interesting facts you've got.
There's just so much. I can't think of anything right off the top of my head outside of just the building of the city.
What do you think
Just
changed the what stopped the growth or changed how? I mean, because you guys were staying on Main Street.
I think really the development of the malls
Mhm.
and just
It's the second time I've
yeah,
heard that.
just developing of malls because people just started leaving town because they could do, I reckon, more shopping or whatever.
Mhm. Consumerism.
You know,
Yeah.
with it.
But,
And then if you don't have that growth, Crescent City really has not grown that much
mhm. It's
over the
still just a
years.
beautiful
Yeah,
community.
well, like it's only like I said, 5, 6 blocks wide. There's not growth needs expansion
Right.
areas. So unless it grows out, which it really hasn't grown out much.
Really, it
Yeah,
needs revitalizing,
yes,
not growth
yeah,
necessarily.
yeah.
And I didn't realize that Crescent City had such a small footprint
Yes, it's a
comparatively.
very small footprint.
Yeah, because Crescent City, when you look at the bigger cities, I know there's Willaca, Pomona
Hmm.
Park, all the surrounding areas, but Crescent City really stands out to me as the southern seat, if you will.
Yeah,
It's so interesting that it's just that tiny footprint
yeah,
with such a rich history, and the
yeah.
Women's Club forging the way
Yeah,
on it.
well, I know when my granddad, I grew up in the house that my grandmother grew up in.
Hmm.
And my granddad, after they got married, it was on Orange Avenue, which was the last road south going out of town. And you turned on Orange and you hit the old highway.
Okay.
Below that, it was just strictly orange groves.
Wow, that's a lot of
So
orange
it
grove.
was a lot
Yeah.
of winding in Crescent City. And granddad took that house and rotated it to, because it faced the highway, he rotated it to face Orange Avenue. And he built a gas station right there because that was the last station before you left the town.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
So, and then you hit Old Highway 17. It rounded, went out Denver area in
way to
that way.
capitalize
But
on
but I
location.
remember doing a interview with Dr. Collette before he died, and that was all Collette Orange Groves back down
Okay.
south. And he said he can remember standing there with a gun with his dad telling the road people that you could not come through and build a new highway until we picked the oranges. They
Yeah.
wanted that last grove picked before they
Oh,
would
can you
allow them to come
imagine
in.
picking that last grove?
Yeah,
How that must
yeah,
feel. And citrus was a huge
very huge.
part of our
Yeah.
community.
And that's what my granddad and my grandparents, that's what sent my mom to college was oranges.
It's funny. I just had a memory come back. So my grandmother and her sisters were all Pomona Park, Crescent City,
Mhm.
and she would get together with her friend and would have me drive them around through the orange groves, and they would just reminisce. And at the time, they were listening to music, but
Yeah.
they must have been doing flashbacks to what they did as teens.
That's what we did as teens in the
So
orange groves.
driving through the
Yeah.
orange groves, who knew? Who
Yeah.
knew that orange
Yeah.
groves would be so entertaining, right? But when
And
when
no
you don't
orange
have
groves
anything else
left
to do,
now.
I know that's
Yeah.
wild to me.
Yeah.
And then you've got a lot of fern out there. Is that something that
Yes.
came later, or
It kind of developed at the same time. And
okay?
the oranges was more prevalent, but
Yeah,
the ferns are the only thing left of
yeah.
really
Wow.
with it.
Well, I would be very excited to sit down with you and to look at some of the history
Hmm.
that and thank you, first of all, before I even say that, thank you for honoring the history of that community, because if it weren't for the work that your family did and now you're doing to keep it
Yeah.
alive, there would be pieces of this community that would be lost. If people did not take interest in, and care into what brought us to where we are today. And I think that's so important. And I hope that if you're watching this, that you understand that to build a better tomorrow, we have to look at where we came from and look at what we need to do and develop and what got us to where we are. And if we've made a mistake, that happens. That's how we grow as people.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean we need to do away with the history of that. Let's learn from it. And who knows? When you're going through grandma's stuff, she may have something that could be a key
Yeah.
component to helping someone else
Yeah.
figure out their history.
That was one of my mother's favorite sayings. You don't know where you're going if you don't know where you've been.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Well, I think that this is step one in the documentation of the history of Crescent City. And again, if you have a place that you could help store or display, even more importantly,
Yeah.
the artifacts that you've got in your house right now, I would love for you to connect with
Yeah.
us. We'll be sure that we put all the pieces together. Be sure to leave links to do that below. And I look forward to getting with you and sharing with everybody
Okay.
some of those things that you've been able to hold on to. Very interested to see those books. I'm excited about
Yeah.
that. But again, I love that you've been able to keep it in the family, and now 7 generations
7
are
generation.
in the
Yeah.
same place and walking the same
Hmm.
the same paths that generations before did.
Yes.
Super,
Yeah.
super magical, if you
Yeah.
ask me. All
All
right.
right.
Well, thank you
Appreciate
for
it.
sharing that.
Thank
Some
you.
great
Thank
facts
you.
there. And be sure to
Yeah.
tune in. We'll be in touch. But if you have any other questions, reach out to us. Check out the previous podcast for more history on Putnam County. Until the next episode, have a good one. Thank you.
Okay.